So, and I am going to start the captions so that we have some closed captions going on here. So I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight to our webinar for the Digital Citizenship PLN, focusing on the ways that equity and digital citizenship are related. And I'm very happy to have all of our guests here and our participants. And if you're watching this webinar afterwards, we hope that everyone learns something here this evening. So I'm going to ask each person in turn to kind of introduce themselves. My co-host tonight is Vanessa Monterosa. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa to introduce herself, and then let our panelists introduce themselves. So my name is Nancy Watson. I am a past co-chair of the Digital Citizenship PLN for ISTE. Have been passionate about digital citizenship for at least a decade now, and in the last few years have also gotten very concerned about equity issues and how those kinds of issues play into the opportunities for digital citizenship and what digital citizenship means and could mean or should mean. So I am right now a digital learning consultant at Region 10 Education Service Center in Dallas, Texas. So Vanessa, I will let you have a shot at introducing yourself.
Thanks, Nancy, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever everyone may be. I'm Dr. Vanessa Monterosa. I currently serve as a program and policy researcher for the Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm also outgoing DigCitPLN chair within the past year and a half or so. DigCit is near and dear to my heart. I've been deeply immersed in this DigCit world for about the past decade, and that over the last 6 years, I've been focused on developing our system level supports within LA Unified around digital citizenship. So that means updating, designing district-wide policies and programs specifically for our executive and school leaders. So really excited to have this conversation with everyone here tonight.
Molly, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and I will just preface your introduction with saying that I have this huge fangirl moment going on because I read Molly's work when I was doing my second master's, and I quoted her in numerous lit reviews. So I was so happy to finally get to sort of meet her sort of in person tonight. We've been having lovely conversations over email, and this was our first chance to see each other. So Molly, tell us a little bit about your research and what your interest in digital citizenship and equity is.
Sure. So I myself am a former teacher. I started my career, I think as I mentioned before, in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then came to California. And I taught in both locations on either side of the country in underserved communities, and had the opportunity to really in California, try and use technology to support students in new ways. I went on from teaching to a doctoral program in learning sciences and technology design, and I did some work there, which I will present on tonight, about the ways in which technology can be used to support learning for underserved students. And currently I run a research company, and we work with educational technology companies to help them understand and apply this kind of research, as well as understand the practitioner and school leader point of view and perspective, and really to elevate the voices of the users in the technology design process. So digital citizenship sort of weaves in and out of all of those topics and all of the stakeholders that I work with day in and day out.
And I have long had another girl crush on Knikole Taylor. So Knikole, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Knikole Taylor. I'm an instructional technology coordinator for a school district in the Dallas, Texas area. This is my 18th year in education, and I will say, just as a user of technology, and as a teacher and as a teacher mom, when you talk about digital citizenship, it's just good citizenship. You know, it's just helping kids to be good people, and so it's really important to me because I work I work in the community that I live. My kids are a part of that community. So as I am supporting kids and supporting their parents, I'm supporting, you know, the friends of my own children. And so when you think about being a citizen, and just, you know, I just tell kids that being a good person and being a good citizen, like that, those characteristics, they just carry on with you online. Because if you're a good person and you have good character, then you know you behave the same way online as you do face to face. And equity is one of those words that I think we've been hearing a lot about over the last couple of years, but you know, no matter how you slice it, people have been doing, you know, the equity work for a long time, because when you speak of equity, it's just about being fair and being just and making sure that we take care, you know, just being humane, right? And taking care of people's needs. So the last couple of years, I've really been interested in seeing how we can, you know, move past just DigCit, because when you talk about DigCit, and a lot of people like to, you know, scratch the surface with be nice and hide your password, but there's just so much more to it. And so that's kind of where my passion has been the last few years.
Thanks. And Mindy, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I also have a girl crush on you. How's that? And then I can like get all of that out of the way. So I've met Mindy at a couple of different ISTE conferences, and I was also very pleased that she's able to join us tonight. So tell us about yourself a little bit, Mindy.
Sure. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Sorry. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I'm also a former teacher. I was a special education teacher in North Carolina for about 8 or 9 years. And currently I work at CAST. CAST is a small nonprofit in just north of Boston. And we work solely on universal design for learning. So we do professional learning, and we have a publishing arm, and we do research and development, building tools and testing them out. And my current role, I'm actually the director of digital communications and outreach. And I like to think of part of my role is actually thinking about digital citizenship with adults. So I also am one of the co-founders of UDL Chat. I'm the current president of the Inclusive Learning Network at ISTE. And so when I chat online, when I'm, you know, interacting with teachers either through my own personal account or the 23 other accounts that I actually run, social accounts that I run, I'm always trying to model that digital citizenship. And like Knikole said, you know, it's more than just being nice and hiding your password. It's about being a citizen online. So I'm really excited to be here and share with you all tonight and learn from all of you.
Great. Well, I realized that I already skipped past the first slide that I was supposed to talk about. So let me go back one here. And we were just going to ask our participants to type in the chat box the answer to what are some equity issues that you are noticing during these unusual times. And perhaps our panelists will be able to speak to some of those issues if you're able to just kind of tell us a little bit about what it is you're experiencing. And now, Vanessa, I think I was supposed to shut up and turn it over to you a long time ago, but I'm really doing it now. So here you go.
So as Nancy mentioned, you know, tonight our conversation is focused around DigCit, equity, and believe it or not, this conversation has been months in the planning, and little did we know that this is just so incredibly, many of us are really facing these challenges head on, that tonight the conversations that we have and some helpful, you know, advice that we learned during our conversation, we can really put it into practice tomorrow, because so many of us are living really challenging and complex times. So that's just a little bit of grounding around where we're at this conversation, but we're going to go ahead and start with Molly, and she's going to provide does the research say when it comes to underserved communities and technology use and access?
Yes, I can. But before I do that, I think it feels appropriate to foreground the fact that none of the research that I'm about to present took place in a context like we're experiencing today, because we've never experienced anything like this today, anything like what we are now. And so some of it feels tongue-in-cheek to be making recommendations for how you might proceed in the time of global pandemic. But some of it I think can be massaged and adjusted and, you know, taken for what it's worth. And so really in this moment, I think it's as important for educators to trust their gut as it is to follow the sort of information that came from the research. That being said, a couple of years back, I was working on a project with Linda Darling Hammond at Stanford. She asked if we could sit down together and figure out what do we really know about how technology can be used to support underserved students. And this was a really amazing opportunity because I had had the chance to do this work in the classroom myself and then to train other teachers on the kind of supports that I was putting in place. And it was great to be able to look through all of the research to figure out what are the trends that sort of rise up when you look at a whole bunch of research at once. And so I personally reviewed more than 400 papers. What went into our final literature review is about 50 papers. And when those were taken together, a couple of best practices sort of rise above everything else. Before I give you numbers 1 through 5, I want to say the most important thing is that the tools you are choosing have strong alignment between the context that you are in, the objective that you have, the learning objective, and the tool itself. And without that kind of alignment, none of these tips are going to be more supportive for underserved students than any other practices. And particularly in these moments when we're thinking about access specifically and the variability of access in different students' homes, this is something that will be even more important than ever to consider. One of the stories I like to tell about alignment is when I was doing this research, we had a local school was gifted one-to-one Chromebooks for the entire school. It was a charitable donation. It was very generous, but they did not have internet access, and so the Chromebooks were essentially useless. And that's just like a really strong example of when things are not aligned, the technology is not going to meet the needs of the students or of the educators using it. That being said, when we're thinking about what it is that you can take away in terms of how to best use technology to support these populations, number one, you can advance on the slide, is to stop using technology for remediation. It is shown in the research that students in underserved communities more frequently use technology for these purposes, for drill and practice, than their more privileged peers. And in other locations, people are using technology for developing 21st century skills, communication, collaboration, synthesizing, inferencing. This is the universe of higher order thinking skills. And so the number one recommendation I have is, if given the opportunity to choose between a tool that's going to support students to drill and practice so that they can give information correctly on a test, or to engage critically with content themselves, definitely always select the latter if that's possible. Number two, we found that students in underserved communities benefit from opportunities to create original digital content. We want to move students from being content consumers to content creators. And there's a whole lot of ways that this can be done. I think you all in the, our participants will be able to speak to your ways, and feel free to drop them in the chat. But some ways that you can think about doing this is having students create multimedia stories, filming and producing documentaries, designing posters, leveraging social media as a tool, and publishing on wikis or blogs or websites. And I think particularly in the time of COVID, we want to think about ways in which we can build in authentic social interactions with relation to this content creation, because this is one thing that students are going to be desperately missing over the next 2, 4, 6 months. And it's something that also makes the content creation task far more authentic for the students. The third thing we found is that students benefit from tools that promote interactivity and discovery. And so we want students to be able to engage with new ideas that are represented in multiple forms. A lot of this comes from the CAST and the UDL work. I cite strongly from all of your work and appreciate everything you do. It is important that students can access things both. I should just let you do it because I know you're going to cover it at the end of the talk, but in a variety of different multimedia forms. And then other ways to think about this are, engaging with complex phenomena in a way where they can discover things. I had a professor that published research about invent versus tell. If you let students play around with something first, and then invent a story about how it works, and then you tell them what it is that they were supposed to learn from it, they're much more likely to remember than if you tell them first and let them invent their story second, right? And so leading with the investigation and the discovery, something I'm working on right now as a mother homeschooling a 5-year-old, but is also something that is very well backed up by research. The next thing we found is that we want to honor students as experts and let them share their expertise with authentic audiences of their peers, of others in the world. We no longer live in a spatially based community. We live in a global community, particularly now when everyone in the world is experiencing this pandemic. And we know that students are experts of their own experience. And I think now more than ever, it's essential to have them share whatever it is that they have expertise in, whether it be how they're feeling and how they're processing and what their experiences are right now, or how to complete scratch games, or our students have all kinds of hidden pockets of expertise, and giving them the opportunity to highlight that and share it in their words with the world is really beneficial. And then the last thing that we found is that it is important to have the right blend of teachers and technology. I don't now, nor will I ever, believe that you can replace a teacher with a digital tool and get anywhere near the same kind of outcomes for students or supports for students. There's so much research that says that the relationships that people have with students are integrally tied to the academic outcomes and all of that. And I think what we want to do is to find tools that seamlessly support the educational goals and kind of fit into the background of those goals and make them the background and not the highlight of what's happening, right? Technology should be there to support what you're trying to do and not to be the thing that you're trying to do itself. So those are the findings, and if anyone is interested, after I'm done talking, I will drop a link to the EdSurge article that I wrote about this and the longer literature review that we published in the chat window. Looks like it is there already. And I wanted to sort of elaborate on what I was saying before I presented the research, which is that all of that research is totally lost in the face, this being a totally novel experience in U.S. education, in global education, right? And I chose this graphic to represent that. This is law students, right? So it's not necessarily our K-12 population, but they are articulating how do they feel about shifting everything to online classes. And this really, the anxious, the apprehensive, the uneasy, the surreal, this is how we're all feeling trying to manage this in our homes. And I think trying to integrate that into our understanding of how best to proceed, that not only our students, but we are all undergoing trauma right now. And so to take that sort of trauma-informed compassion and bring it into all of your educational activities now for yourself, for your students, for the teachers that you work with, I think that's really important to keep top of mind at this time. So can you advance so that I can remember what is on the slide? So in trying to summarize, I have so many things that I think about the intersection of equity and digital citizenship, but right now I think it's really important to keep a close eye on the context. And I peeking ahead at your slides, I think that you'll speak a little bit about this as well, but just some numbers to keep top of mind are that it's 114,000 students in New York City are homeless. 22 million US students rely on school for hot meals. And those are things that you might be able to see. When you're talking about digital citizenship and digital interactions online, there are a lot of other context-related things that you might not be able to see that are going to affect a student's comfort and ability to engage with their peers, with themselves, to put themselves out there in this new venue format. And so I think the first and most important thing before you think about applying any research is just to monitor the context and just to sort of have like a running log of notes of like what in the context might be affecting these kids, and to have ongoing conversations with students about that to really bring it top of mind for everybody so that we can all process this together. The second, I think, major takeaway is then to be really explicit in your instruction related to technology. I call this socio-technological norms, right? The way that we engage with technology as a social species. And my favorite socio-technological strategy is to think aloud, right? If you are going to type in the chat window and then erase something and retype it in another word, think aloud to your students about what you've done and why you've done that, and even say, I was going to say it this way, but I chose it this way because I think that would honor this other group more. We want to be the voices that are in the students' heads when we are no longer there. And so the more you can share your explicit real-time responses to engaging with the world online, the better. And then after you model it, we want to give students structured opportunities to observe and analyze the way other people are engaging online. And then the second bullet here is for them to practice and try on their own digital citizenship type of activities, figure out who they are online, and then to reflect and refine on that. Like, ooh, when I said that, maybe it was interpreted the wrong way, and I wish that I had said it this way. And so in the future, I'm going to try and remember these things. But to really step by step scaffold these things, because now more than ever, when all of our students have to be present and online, it's a great chance for them to figure out who it is that they want to be in the digital physical world, and to really refine that. So those are some key takeaways. So an additional thought there, but I've taken up quite a lot of time, so I'm not going to say any more now.
Well, I am so excited to hear how much you're singing so many of our songs here in the Digital Citizenship PLN. So that was awesome, and it is going to be a great segue. I just have a feeling into Knikole. I'm kind of thinking that you might, I was supposed to ask you, do you have a biggest takeaway, or do you want to talk about that later?
I can say very quickly is to summarize everything. It's in the orange box if you advance one more. Now is the time when everybody should be failing forward, right? You should follow your instincts, trust your gut. Even though I run a research organization, our party line right now is practice above theory, right? Now is the time to explore and experiment, show up for your kids. And we were talking about this before we started. What comes out of these really unprecedented times has strong potential to define the next era of public education. And so don't be afraid to play and explore and engage and figure out what works. Because I really do think we are going to be heads down in this for the long haul.
Right. Thank you so much, Molly. That was terrific. All right, Knikole.
I have nothing to say. I just want to keep listening to Molly. Let's just let.
Yeah, but I know you got stuff to say too, girl. So I want you to.
I just want to listen.
Talk too, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, she's gonna have so much to say about what Molly just said. So,
exactly. You know me so well.
All right. So
I was just thinking as Molly was talking about how we live in, a globally connected society. Like we're no longer, it's not just, just your neighborhood anymore. And I mean, who would have thought when we started talking about this panel that we would be in the middle of a pandemic when we, when we had this, and we're thinking about digital citizenship, and we're thinking about being connected, and we're thinking about looking at it through the lens of equity. I think about all the districts all around who are now passing out devices and ensuring that kids have Wi-Fi, when before, like, was the message that these things are inessential, that you don't necessarily need that? Did it separate the haves and the have-nots? And now we're trying to level the playing field, and maybe not even looking at some of the things that we are granting to kids and parents through this research lens that that Molly just talked us through. I'm really interested in that. So thanks, Molly. You set my brain on fire. I'll say the last couple of years, I've really been looking at DigCit as a way, like, it is an entryway to get kids thinking about what they're putting into the world, right? But when I think about students, and I think about kids, think about the kids I support, I think about my own kids in my home first, and then I think about the kids that I teach, the kids in our community who are their friends and who, have a lot of influence in their lives as well. And I have these conversations with other parents, and I have these conversations with teachers, and we talk about digital citizenship. They're like, oh yeah, I taught that lesson at the beginning of the year. Like, the kids know, don't give out your address. The kids know, don't give out your password. They know those things, but really there's so much more. So moving beyond just like that hashtag and just DigCit, and thinking about how we're talking to kids about acceptance, and how we're talking to kids about these different connections and these different relationships that they are building and that they are forming, because our kids are connected. And kids that, different upbringings and different backgrounds. So how are we preparing kids to be able to just be good people, right? When we think about global awareness and connectivity. So when I think about this work, when it as it relates to digital citizenship equity, I have to think about my own journey and my own work. I've kind of been on this journey of discovery, I'd say probably the last 10 or so years, where I had to kind of I had to decenter myself and look outside of myself to really uncover and unmask what I didn't know. I had to discover that I have biases, and anyone who says that they don't have biases, they're lying. They're not telling the truth. They're not being honest with themselves. And so I've been able to just connect with other people who have more experience and more knowledge in this work. And the more that I learn, the more that I grow, the more that I'm able to apply to my daily work as I lead equity lens. But I'm constantly checking myself. Like, I feel like that's always the biggest job. That's the hardest job, is just to check yourself. Nancy talks about, we do this activity. I do a workshop where I take teachers through conversations, and really the purpose of the conversation is simply to allow teachers to look in a mirror and see, like, what part are you playing, and not only helping kids to step in and see themselves and speak up and look at life through an equity lens. But what are you doing? How are you stepping up? Like, what are you saying? What kind of work are you doing? Because we know that kids hear what we say, but they model, repeat, they learn by what we do. So when we create safe spaces where all kids feel welcome, all kids feel as if they belong, when we model what it means to accept people who believe differently than we do, then that's how we raise good citizens. That's how we put good people into the world. And we were just talking earlier, like digital citizenship, it's the key word there is citizenship. And at the end of the day, like I want to help put good people in the world. I want to be a good person. I want the people that I work with and I play with and I attend church with and I do life with, I want those people to be aware of how our actions and the things that we put out in the world not only affect us, but also affect the people around us. So that's kind of been the lens for what and I can't say that, oh, I know, like Molly, I don't have research behind it. I can't say I have a lit review, but I can say that what I've learned is that I'll never know it all, right? Like, and I think I'm so okay with knowing what I don't know. Like, I'm so okay with knowing that I will never be an expert here, but that this will continually be a journey. And the more I learn, the more I understand what I don't know, and the more I want to learn, and the more that I'm able to really apply this to my work through the lens of looking at instructional technology. I was thinking back to what Molly said and how, you know, the things that she was talking about, how we should use technology to allow kids to create and make global connections and not for remediation. And just in looking at her work and thinking about the communities in which I serve, the underrepresented communities, like that is not usually how technology is used. Kids are put on programs to help close the achievement gap, but the achievement gap is there because kids are bored. Because kids are put on programs that don't allow them to be, you know, to be free and to take a lead and have a voice in what they do. So just helping teachers go through conversations, and we actually do an activity where they step in and step out to identify with things that have happened in their lives, or to identify with times that they spoke up for others. But oftentimes what happens is they're often able to identify with the fact that they're not doing enough. And I often say, oftentimes teachers will say, well, I just didn't want to say anything. And I think silence says so much more than your words ever could, because oftentimes I believe that in your silence, that really tells people like you're okay. Where you know, I can easily, I believe like you have to call people out. There's a way that I believe in calling people out, because you want to call people out to call them into being better, doing better, thinking through things in a better way, but simply asking, hey, this is what you said, what did you mean by that? And guiding people through thinking about just doing better and being better. So I think the key takeaways that I would like to share here, we could go to I think I only have one more slide. Oh, I may have one, yeah. So this is just an image that I like to share when I'm discussing this with teachers or with students, just when we think about digital citizenship, like how important it is. Like it touches every facet of life. And I think now, I like to tell them, you know, in the news now, teachers are losing jobs because they don't practice good digital citizenship, right? People are unemployed. They're losing, you know, their lives are being altered because they don't practice digital citizenship. No longer, you know, when I was in school way back in the 80s and 90s, as my oldest likes to say, you know, you went down to that computer class and that's when you talked about those kind of things. But everyone's the computer teacher. Everyone is responsible for digital citizenship. It's the mom's job. It's the dad's job. It's the math teacher's job, because it really touches every facet of our lives. So I guess my takeaways would be like, in this work, what I've learned is like, you cannot help anyone else until you help yourself. I know if you are on Twitter or connected anywhere where there are a lot of educators, I hear a lot of talk and there's a lot of talk and a lot of finger pointing. It's so easy to see what other people are not doing right. But I think the harder thing to do is to hold the mirror up to yourself to see where you fall short. where you can learn more, where you can be more equitable in your own practices, and how you could just be better to the people around you. So on my journey, I've just learned to connect with other communities who have more experience in this work. Communities like Clear the Air, or other communities, Jose Vilson. I'm just thinking about a few people on Twitter that I follow that have really helped me on this journey, and given me literature and had conversations, and just in decentering yourself and realizing that you're not the expert. You need to connect with others on this journey. Another thing that I've realized over the last few months, because you do this work, you're reading, you're going out, you're reading and researching and sharing and connecting with educators, and sometimes it just feels like nothing's happening. But what I'm learning is through all these little small fires that you start with conversations, and you just by sparking people to think differently, big change happens from small fires. So just don't think that doing small work doesn't matter, because those things, they add up. So just start those small fires, and then you'll see big change.
Knikole, before we go on to Mindy, there is one question. Can you explain a little bit about what you mean by decentering yourself? And then also in the chat, when you're done talking, if you could maybe share some of those Twitter recommendations that you mentioned, but talk a little bit about what decentering means to you.
Decentering means to take yourself, move yourself out of the way. It's not about you. It's not about how you feel. It's not about what's best for you, but it's really about, because, just looking at equity is one of those words that I see people tagging on everything now. It's the truth. It's not a new word. Everybody's acting like it's a new word. It's not. It's about being fair, right? It's just about being humane and doing what's right for people. So moving yourself out of the way and thinking through the lens of what is best for the people, which sometimes that means that Knikole may be uncomfortable. That means Knikole may have to take a back seat, but what is best for the people, the people that I serve? And for me, it's what is best for the teachers that I support, what is best for the students, the parents, the community that I support. So decentering just means to take yourself out of the way and do what's best for the people, which I won't say sometimes, which most of the time is not what's best for you, but it is what's going to be what's best for the people. Yeah. And I'll share all of those. Edge color, Clear the Air, I'll put all those in the chat.
I love you. Thank you. That was wonderful, as I knew it would be. Vanessa, you want to hop in and introduce Mindy like we talked about?
Sure. So I wanted to make a comment on Knikole and Molly's information so far. That we've talked about how, sometimes we've witnessed where educators teach a lesson and then they think, all right, I checked off that digital citizenship box, I can move now. Knikole had mentioned, you can't help anyone else until you help yourself. And those are such key takeaways, especially for us as leaders in our context, to practice digital citizenship. That's another piece of where, when we're talking about digital citizenship and equity, this is digital citizenship for all, right? That's the name of our webinar today, and that everyone is responsible to understand what it means to be a digital citizen, and it's not just for our students. And sometimes that detail is lost. So thank you so much for sharing those.
I was been holding in, but Knikole, that was amazing. And I just wanted to build on what you were saying, Vanessa, which is, as you all are doing this great work with the grownups and making yourself really vulnerable for them so that you are an example, I think it's such a great example then for them to turn around and make themselves vulnerable in that same way in front of their students. And if we never do that in front of students, they will never know that that's a thing that you can and should do. And so I think starting from the top, right, Knikole, the way in which you're teaching the grown-ups to do this, they're oftentimes the hardest barrier. So amen to you. I would pick children over adults most times. And also, I think it's just a great opportunity for us to share everything that we are learning and have it trickle down to the students with this kind of really explicit modeling I was talking about. Thank you.
Molly, a good place for those, first of all, my heart may burst because Molly gave me a shout out right there, but a good place to where I get a lot of material that I share with teachers so they can go back and share. Teaching Tolerance has great lesson plans and activities because a lot of times teachers, they just don't know where to start when it comes to these conversations and how to digging deeper. So in looking for a way to allow kids to be a little bit more vulnerable with you and model that with them, that's a great platform to use.
I have 1,000 other questions, but I'm going to ask them some other time.
Well, thank you so much for both contributing even more and deepening and enriching our conversation. And to jump off, Knikole, with what you just said in terms of digging even deeper, I want to invite Mindy to tell us a little bit about how Universal Design for Learning creates opportunities for all learners to participate in the digital world and, be those effective and compassionate digital citizens that we want to see.
That's right. And I think I feel like I get to sit at the big kids table because following Molly and Knikole is a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to try. So Universal Design for Learning really started as a civil rights issue. So we actually at CAST, we used to do direct services with students, and we had students that were in wheelchairs. And one of the problems that some of them encountered was they couldn't even get into the school because there were big stairs in front of the school, so they couldn't enter the front door. So as a metaphor, sometimes when we think about digital environments, what digital barriers like that are we creating? Because these kids couldn't even get into the school. Of course, they couldn't access the learning. So what digital barriers are we creating for our learners? And when our learners are creating things, what digital barriers are they creating? So really, as Molly and Knikole said, not only thinking about what we're creating for our students, but what we're helping our students create for the world. Those are also important things to think about. And so UDL provides a framework to proactively plan for the widest range of learners that we can possibly think of and that we'll encounter. So that's really the start of Universal Design for Learning. Another concept that's really important in Universal Design for Learning is disability is often context dependent. And what are our digital contexts disabling when we create them, when we share them, when we use them, when we procure those tools that we're using online with our students right now? Are those contexts that we're presenting or that we're creating disabling? I loved that I know that they're auto captions, but it's so wonderful to see webinars with captions on, because not only do captions help people who are hard of hearing or who are deaf, they can also help English language learners, they can help students with attention problems, they can, there's all sorts of people. I actually use captions when I'm watching movies so that I can catch the dialogue. And I don't have any hearing problems at all. But yeah, so that the idea of Universal Design for Learning really is to think about the students who have the most difficulties or are we even think about students who are gifted and talented, and thinking about those two ends of a spectrum. If we aim towards the middle, we're not actually going to hit anybody. But if we go towards the margins, we actually hit a broader range of our learners. And the idea that disability is context dependent really has to do with, so this is actually a screenshot from a video that is completely silent. The woman that is signing is using ASL, American Sign Language. There's the only thing that would allow you to understand, unless you understood American Sign Language, you wouldn't actually be able to understand the video unless you put the captions on. So in that environment, I don't understand American Sign Language. I would be disabled if I were watching that video without the captions. So really sort of changing the framework of disability to be context dependent and really dependent on how we're developing and supporting that environment. And I'm sorry, my dog is really begging for attention right now, so you might hear him whining in the background. And if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, so if you can't participate fully in the digital world, how can you then participate in being a digital citizen? So that's really the idea of the importance of Universal Design for Learning. And if you haven't heard about Universal Design for Learning, here's a super, super quick crash course. So it comes from the cognitive neuroscience and the learning sciences. And basically, so if you can see my fist, this model is going to be our brains. And this is the front of our brain, this is the back of our brain, this is our spinal cord right here. In the center of our brain are our affective networks. So the things that, it's where our emotions are made, it's where, our fight or flight response is in there, all sorts of things. So that's the why of learning. And we think about how people vary in their engagement. So they vary in how they engage with something, whether something is interesting, whether they can sustain their attention, all of those great things. And that's part of what, and so humans vary in those networks. They, just human beings. At the back of our brain are our recognition networks. So that's how we hear, we see, all of that stuff is in the back of our brains. And so we want to, and we all vary in how we take in information, the what of learning. So we, some of us, I use glasses sometimes, I use glasses for reading. So that's part of my disability, is that I have I have some vision, I need vision correction. But everybody varies in all of that. So some people don't wear glasses, some people are blind, some people don't see very well. Some people can't hear, some people don't hear very well. So all of that information, when we're taking it in, we vary in how we do that. And then very last thing, the front of our brains, our strategic network. So if you've ever heard the story of Phineas Gage, where he got the railroad spike stuck up in the front of in his frontal lobe, he was unable to control his impulses. So it's really about our executive functions. It's all about how we, the task orientation, all of those great things are right at the front of our brains. And we all vary in how we do that. And so really the biggest takeaway from Universal Design for Learning is that human variability is the norm. It's not the exception. So when we think about our learners, when we think about our classrooms, and yeah, please go to, that was perfect. The next slide is perfect. So when we think about the learners in our classrooms, we have to think about that variability. We can't assume that everybody's going to learn in the same way or with the same, coming to the learning with the same background information or engagement. Some of our students may not have breakfast. That can obviously affect attention. Some, they come with hunger or food insecurities. They come with, they just broke up with, everything from they just broke up with their boyfriend to their parents are getting to a divorce to they're homeless to, everybody comes with different things. And so we have to, and we can plan for that. We know that our students will come with these different variabilities. So how do we change our mindset to include more for learning is all about? So so this is one of my favorite quotes from Joe Gerstmann. If you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. And it's really about the intention that we put behind what we're doing with our students, but also thinking about and I loved what Molly and Knikole were saying about really, modeling for our learners. When we are struggling with, oh my gosh, I've got to caption this video before I put it online, or, oh my gosh, I've got to, I have to make sure that my podcast also has a transcript, or, whatever sort of accessibility, or thinking about the variability that that people bring to the learning environment. If we're not intentional and we don't share that with our students and say, when I put this video up, I'm going to add captions because I know that captions are helpful for some people, then we can also help our learners do the same thing. And then it won't have to be, it'll just be part of video creation that we add captions, or we add, audio descriptions, or all of those great things that are accessibility. They're accessibility features, but they're also Universal Design for Learning features. So it's really all about intention. And you know, it's all about, again, like Knikole said, being better citizens, being better people, and the more that we intentionally include you know, everyone, then the less likely we are to exclude, because we don't want to exclude anybody. And so my big takeaway is to design with empathy, not only our students, for our students, but I'll help our students design with empathy. Because none of us actually what one of my colleagues likes to say is that we are all temporarily abled. So, you know, even as we grow older, our eyesight goes, our mobility is challenged, our, you know, any number of things could happen to us that suddenly put us in a category of disability. So if we put empathy in our designs and we help our learners put empathy in their designs, the more equitable and inclusive our digital environments can be.
Well, that is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, so our captions are going to go away, but I love so much about these 3 conversations, and it's like one long conversation, and I don't even know where to start to try to tie all these threads together. But wow, what a great panel. Vanessa, you are so good at recapping. Do you have anything that you'd like to tie things up with here? Not to put you on the spot.
Nancy. No, it's okay. You know, I've been taking some copious notes here just to kind of thread along like all of the salient points of our conversation, where, you know, in the beginning we started about, and I know you had this disclaimer, Molly, around the research, and, you know, now that our world as educators has fully been disrupted, I think the research is still pertinent, though, and I think even more so now, when there's always so much research being done in environments where it's like, well, you know, how do we really put it into practice? Maybe this is an opportunity, you know, to do that. So we really appreciate the takeaways of how to apply the research to practice that you shared. And then Knikole, all of your pieces around, you know, you need to call them out to invite them in. I thought that was so brilliant. And again, thinking about how we all need to be learners in this space so that we can model it for our students. Because if you can't help anyone else until you help yourself, right? And then lastly, I think for me, Mindy, what really was a sobering thought is the temporarily abled piece that you just shared. I think my mind was just so blown right now when you said that. But all of this has to do with kind of like our responsibility as leaders to model and really put into practice equity. And I know, you know, we've talked about equity in terms of it has many forms. Equity has forms in terms of gender equity, racial equity. And I know that we didn't delve deeply into the types of equity, but it is our responsibility to demonstrate what does that look like in practice. Those are my wrapped up thoughts.
Well, I just want to thank everybody again for participating tonight. I think that was a beautiful conversation and so incredibly timely, and I just cannot thank you enough for all of your expertise and your time. I know many of us have spent a lot of time in front of Zoom webinars in the last few days, so I appreciate your willingness to come through on this one, and just want to double check to see if anybody else has any additional questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any questions. One question for Mindy: does UDL acknowledge that more time may be required for teaching?
That's a great question. And in some ways it does. So UDL, I think of UDL really as a school reform, not only a civil rights thing, but about school reform. And UDL works best when we're thinking about competency rather than grade levels, or, you know, everybody comes to learning in their own way and in their own time. So yes, for some students, it's going to take longer for them to get the concepts and understand the concepts. And that may take longer in teaching. But it's not an explicit like UDL takes longer. It's more we try to fit into the system as it exists. And as we before the webinar started, we were having a conversation about how this new situation, one of the good things that might come out of it is that the system might be upended, and that might be a very, very good thing if we keep all of these things in mind about equity and how learning actually works and the research behind it, and acknowledging our biases, and including people that we may not have thought to include before. We're at CAST, we're talking a lot about remote learning, distance learning, because it's not all online. Sometimes we have to send homework or send the worksheets along the bus route as they deliver meals. There's different ways that we can think about, and I think that there's different ways that we can think about this whole situation. I think there's also a huge opportunity that we have to really make this system as good as we know it can be. And school is a lot more important, I think, than people realized, because it is that place of stability. It is that place where kids can get meals. It is that place where they can have contact with adults that's positive and reinforcing and supportive that they may not have at home. So I think that people are starting to realize the importance of school, the importance of education, the importance of teachers, and how we really can change the world. And maybe that's my Pollyanna view, but I really think it's possible.
It makes me feel like it's possible after listening to all of you guys tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and there was one other question about recording the webinar. Provided that I do this correctly, then yes, we will be sending out a link to the webinar when after it finishes downloading, and you may get that from ISTE, and it may be, I will try to tweet it all over the place too. So I don't have any final parting thoughts. Vanessa, did you want to say anything to wrap things up other than my gratitude? Yeah.
Exactly. Deepest gratitude, as Nancy said. We might all be Zoomed out, Skyped out. I don't know what other video conferencing tool there is out there, but we deeply appreciate the time you took to sit in front of your computer and have these really, really important conversations with us and those that joined us tonight. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful night, and try to get some time away from your screens. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.